feels different in here than over there. I can tell you right now. uh, I think I want to start saying that we live in a society that is full out of different backgrounds, different ethnic groups, different cultures, and I think thanks to that, this society, this country, is always been exceeding in all the areas. Uh, every society has the necessity to have some kind of social structure in order to function, per se, properly. Unfortunately, during that division or structural division, some of the groups get affected. So my topic today will be the social identity, in this case, a group of people that are related to me uh, directly. One thing I'm going to share with you is this study is, I try very hard to get it out of my personal opinions. So it's based on bibliographical results, subjective, scholarly, and peer review in most cases. So if I say something personal, please forgive me. But that is the reason I choose this topic. The question that I want to answer, that I was going to try to answer is, I know it's very complex, but that is one of the reasons I choose this topic, because it's complex. You don't hear too much about it, but we'll see how it goes. But the question that I want to answer is, because I just said that society requires some kind of social structure, and during this process, some people get affected. In this case, what I'm going to emphasize is on Mexicans that live in this country and that for one reason or another belong to the low or middle class. And how is this going to affect this group of people, particularly their self-esteem, during the development of the sociological structure? The outline that I'm going to try to follow is it's going to be something like this. I'm going to start with the introduction. I'm going to mention some important information. I'll go over the social identity and the social structure, and within the psychological phenomenon, how is this going to affect the self-esteem of the individual, and then transcends to the family, and then to the group, and then it gets all over the place. The effects, the impact, and I'll end up with a conclusion. My conclusion will be basically like to call them the limitations. There are certain limitations in this project that I know it's very hard to understand, but at least I want to mention it to you. Having said that, let me start with the introduction. I like to define identity to begin with, in general. According to the Dr. David Weber, he defines an identity as the group of characteristics and behaviors that an individual follows that makes it recognizable on a particular group. I agree with that. Some people might define it in a different way, depending on the social structure that you are. If you are a psychologist, you might define this in a different way. If you are an economist, you can define that in a different way. But for the sake of the discussion, that's what I have. How is the development of this in Mexicans? I wanted to give you a little preview, a little taste identity. We haven't get to the social identity yet. So I wanted to say something about something historical. In this case, uh, going back to the 1840s when the Treaty of Guadalupe took place. And for those of you, I think most of us know, but for those of you that don't know, is when part of the land of the, well, Mexico became part of the U.S. There was already people living in that land, Mexican to say, that after that process, it became a struggle to identify yourself. And the literature explains that it was the identity process was not only economic but social and political. I think most of the actors, at least 15 that I went over, agree that one of the most common struggles of this process was economic, which led to the self-esteem of the individual, and as we see in a moment. Uh, there are also some important elements that I think is important to mention. Uh, how do we when I say we, I'm defining as we Mexicans perceive identity. How do we perceive that? Well, as an individual thing, which is the result of the sociological structure. If you are economically well established, you identify yourself one way. Your social status is in one way, you also define yourself in a different way. Your political status plays a huge role in here, because if you are one of those politics, your identity is going to be different, believe it or not. But I think we all have seen that in one way or another. Now, why is this division happening is the main question. Why? Why is the link between those divisions and the psychological point that I'm trying to connect? Well, we have seen this in the culture. We have seen this not only locally, but also nationally and internationally. Uh, I wanted to make a point that sometimes during that process, there's a little confusion in there because there is many different forms of identity. There is many different forms of identity. So that's why the authors, the writers who are trying to make this connection, this psychological connection with that process, are having such a hard time to connecting that, because that is national identity, ethnic identity, social identity, which is the one that we wanted to address in this case, and just identity. Some people, they have their own identification, which is okay. I believe that, and I support the authors that some people just identify themselves the way they want. I agree with that too. Now, how this identification is going to be affected by this, like to call it psychological aspect or a psychological phenomenon that we can say? Well, let's see. Let's start with the social identity now in that. How is defined? How is described? Well, the Dr. Pizarro, which is a writer, he has a documentary in psychology. He says, quoting him, that social identity in the group that I'm talking about, which are Mexican, that live in this country, and then for one reason or another belong to the low and middle class. Let's make sure that we understand that. He says that this is a struggling phenomenon that is silent but terrorizing this group little by little. Sometimes the recipients don't even know. When I was reading this, I was a little surprised. I see the things that the writers were saying, but now that I'm applying it to my people, I was feeling the impact. So I agree with that kind of definition, how we perceive identity. Now, we, the Mexicans that belong to this group, perceive identity, social identity, the way we want and the way we are categorized by society. If you are a field worker, how do you how do you perceive identity? As a low, middle, high, or upper? It's a very, I know it's a very difficult task, very difficult. Uh, and again, with the different forms of identity out there, it makes it even more difficult. Now, today's day, we tend to believe, the authors, the writers also support this theory that social identity is mainly, not all, partly part of the sociological structure. If you are someone with, if you are in that group, if you possess power, just power, your identity is going to be affected. In this case, in the positive way, not in the negative form. Now, if for any other reason your identity is going to be negative, this is going to be reflected into the individual self-esteem, which in turn will going to be affecting the family, and I know it's something that I hate to say, but it's going to affect the whole group. This is with the connection that I wanted to say with the with the with the uh, with the psychological aspect with the social structure. My computer in here is okay, but now one seems in a dormant stage or something. That's got to be that one. Okay. Okay. So while they put that together, let's just get a little where we are right now. We're saying that because of the different sociological structures, some groups, in this case Mexicans, that live in this country and for one reason or another belong to the low middle class, are affected, and to be more specific, the self-esteem, which in turn is then transcend to the family and eventually it's affecting the whole group. That's where we stand right now. Okay, so I guess while this gets going, I'm just going to keep going. We all know that society is divided by the economic aspect, the social aspect, and the political aspect. Now, why is this important to mention when we're trying to link this with the psychological aspect in regards to identity? Well, okay, we already said that depending on your economical position, that's going to be the result of your identity. Just to give you an example, this is an author, his name is David Weber, and one of his texts is called Extraños en su tierra nativa. He states that from the economical standpoint of view, if this group of people, based on their economic status, what could have in parentheses field workers, their identity is going to be affected. How do we visualize these people? Are we going to label them in a different way, the way they label themselves? Needless to say, these people, even though they're field workers, but they feel proud of it. They feel proud of being field workers. the connotations that society puts into them, that's what is affecting their self-esteem. And we keep saying, why these people keep working like that when it is low income, very little or no representation at all? Why? And the politicians keep connecting the political aspect. Politicians keep attacking this, saying, as for another writer, his name is Abihan Segawa. He said, well, it is because the psychological aspect is moving through slowly, gradually, and silently. Sometimes it's not being perceived by the people. And that is exactly what one of the reasons that caught my attention to, so I can share with you something about what's going on. Again, as I tried very hard to stay away from personal opinions, in a way, I wanted to be as subjective as I can. And if I come up with something, just forgive me. Okay. Now, once this group of people establish their economical status, needless to say, the political status is going to be affected, as well as the social status, which comes in place the social identity. Where is these people gathered usually? Are they gathered with students? Are they gathered with professors? Are they gathered with investigators? Or are they gathered with some kind of people that do seminars and all kinds of how a society works better? We all know, and the authors say no. Why? Because the people is already being affected in here, and they don't want to say it, or they don't want to let out that the way they feel. So in a way, you don't see it. Nobody mention it, but their self-esteem is already being affected because society tends to label them in a way that they're not like that, but they think to believe, which is the main reason we are trying to address this topic. When it comes to socioeconomic aspect, we, and again, when I say we, I consider part of that group, and again, based on these authors, it is because of the economic situation. It is because of the political, how much we are involved in the political arena. Believe it or not, but it's also part of the academic situation. And something that I like to add is about some kind of linguistics. And a good example, let me start with the last one. We are being criticized for using, in parentheses, Spanglish. I read at least 3 different sources where I was trying to find the connection between this process and the psychological effects in Spanglish. Well, it came out that people in this particular group identified themselves with the use of Spanglish, which in then is, as all the authors say, is being criticized as threatening the mother language. In this case, English. You can choose the side that you want. It's okay, but the authors in this case are saying that this is just another part of this psychological outcome as being placed on a society on a particular level. So if people are not accepted in one level, they have to move to another level. And if people don't know in this case, such as Pedro Morales in one of his books says, if people don't have the time, the capabilities, or learning the English language, so they're going to have to identify themselves socially by the use of Spanglish. Okay? The academic situation, we all see today, and was a study in Texas by a group of students in a psychological field, and they wanted to compare to see what was the outcome of that. They found something that was very interesting, saying that not only our children but adults also get their self-esteem affected when they compare the academic results with another group. In this case, another group that is highly recognized with high score. I think is right. And I think I mentioned to you the economic situation. It easily visualized in how we live, how do we, the subsistence patterns, how is this affects our real estate, type of work, or salaries. All these factors are contributing to the self-esteem of the individual. Now, some people argue that it's something that you choose to do. Well, to a certain degree, but because again, the division, the structural division, sometimes it's pressure from the social economic sector, from the political sector, such in this case. They are not well represented. And again, they compare the academic results, and for some reason or another, this group of people become easy target for politicians. So once the psychological phenomenon is in action, it affects the self-esteem. It diminishes the process of assimilation and acculturation, which is part of the development. Sometimes it creates cultural filters, as one actor mentioned it, which are sometimes misinterpreted by racism, and it's not the case. The impacts, we already said, impacts are individual, and then the families, and then to the group, and eventually the entire group at the international level. And this is the distribution of this is we already said it affects where we work, where we live, the rights and classification, how much power do we have, and the possibilities of moving up, the mobility in terms of economics, in terms of politics, in terms of social structure. So how does this affect the individual? So it affects the self-esteem, lacks models in the group, and sometimes we just settle and say, well, I'll take it. Again, the group segregates the group. It creates negative connotations. The cycle is repeated, and again, it diminishes the process of elimination. So the results of this event is, again, isolation, and it diminishes the process and create linguistic forms, such as I mentioned, and it increments the negative levels and connotations of these groups. I wanted to conclude saying that, as I mentioned before, that this is a very difficult subject because of the fact that sometimes, because there are many different types of identities, it gets confused in the process. I just wanted to mention that there is social identity, ethnic identity, national identity, and identity itself. Social identity is the result of the sociological structure. Ethnic is acquired through the culture. National is how is this identity perceived at the national level, depending on those sociological divisions. And identity itself, some people just identify themselves the way they want, or the way they prefer. And I thank you for your time, and I'm done. question that I might be able to answer, okay? I don't promise to give you the right answer. Well, yeah, that tells you that we're moving very slow. Once this takes place, I'm pretty sure that the connotations that we have in LA are going to change with the help of that particular individual, which I'm very proud of him. Yes. She as far as I know, this is not from a source. I watched the news a couple weeks ago, and she's appointing another Hispanic. The Attorney General is appointing another Hispanic on her cabinet. It's a he, right? Well, but I know it's a Hispanic. Okay, that's as far as I know. Ah, no quise entrevistar a la gente porque toda la gente que conozco yo es hispana y no quería tomar cosas personales. So mejor agarré los libros que estaban más enfocados a la misma. Y como lo dije al principio, yo he estado observando y analizando el proceso y creo que pertenezco a ese grupo. Por eso quería alejarme de las opiniones personales y de las amistades y basarme mejor en los libros. Ahí es el problema, por eso hay ciertas limitaciones. Okay. All right.